Shadowing. Few years runs Papua New Guinea's plains. It's quite a long-running and bit of a complicated issue, but effectively, Puma Energy is the largest supplier of fueling in Papua New Guinea and indeed the only supplier of aviation fuels to the country. So if there is any issue with Puma Energy, it's likely to have some very serious ramifications for fuel supply in the country. At the heart of this issue is basically disagreements between the country's central bank, Bank of Papua New Guinea or BPNJ, and Puma Energy, and the amount of foreign exchanges, the amount of foreign currency that the company need to import crude oil. Now, that has been escalating for quite some time, and we do know that some allegations that the central bank has raised will be raised to the government as part of the 30 days national emergency, and they are examining those allegations that the central bank is raising against Puma Energy. Now, for Puma Energy in this part, it says that the foreign exchange or the currency needs that it require aren't being met, so that it's been unable to import the level of crude oil that needs to be refined to supply the country's energy needs. Now, on top of that, also what we've seen in Bank South Pacific, Papua New Guinea, Guyana's largest bank, they've independently reached to Puma Energy, intending to close its account. Now, in a statement, Bank South Pacific says it is doing so under its obligation to strictly comply with all regulatory requirements. So, pure not being able to bank in Papua New Guinea will, of course, be quite disastrous for country, but something that would lead to, of course, is not being able to operate this business and likely lead to very serious fuel shortages, both and as well for aviation fuel supply. And of course, the issue of foreign currency in Papua New Guinea, particularly for businesses, has always been a problem. It really has for effectively a decade now, and ultimately they come down to against, I guess, the economic mismatch between when there is foreign currency supply and then when it's foreign currency demand. But as is understood, this issues effectively come up from the central bank having a look at the major foreign currency supplies. Now, Puma Energy in March last year wrote to the central bank saying that it didn't have enough foreign currency to be supplying the market as it said, and it is needed. Now, the central bank then enters into special purpose audit of Puma Energy to get an understanding as to level of foreign currency that is needed, and that's now effectively led to this very major disagreement between the central bank and Puma Energy, that likely these allegations that the central bank will raising with the governments about the company. Yeah, what sort of flow-on effect we're likely to see for people of Papua New Guinea? Where the effects we have to saying, the main one that of course concerns many Papua New Guinean has been the grounding of flight. So in December last year, when the central bank and Puma Energy were engaged in this disagreement, Puma Energy said that they didn't have the kind of foreign currency that they didn't need to continue its supply. And we quickly saw the flight were grounded. We saw that Air Niugini and Patriot Air cancels many of their flights in December. We've seen the same thing happen again just last week. So an announcement for Puma Energy that if it wasn't receiving the foreign currency they needed, then wasn't receiving it. and there will be need to then ration its fuel supply. We against flights across the country be cancelled very quickly. So that's likely have a very serious impact on the aviation industry if this can't be worked out or resolved anytime soon. And of course, then it also consider that at the bowser that people will be hit the kind of fuel supply that should exist doesn't exist. And of course, many people in Papua New Guinea are very familiar with kind of power outages that impact the country. So diesel generators are very common for people to run for their household supply. So if the fuel isn't there, of course, it's going to have widespread impacts on household. Yeah. How do you think this is all going to be resolved, Tim? It's concussion, and ultimately that's what the government's rapidly trying to do now. It's called these 30 days of emergency. It basically says, right, we're going to have round table talk to bring everyone to table to see if we can work out the resolution through this. Now, Bank South Pacific has already agreed to extend out when it will be closing accounts Puma Energy till March next year. So at least they provided some relief that the company is going to be able to look and continue banking in the country. So there is certainly not the immediate deadline if the company not being able to bank and therefore it not to be able to fill its supply, of course, Papua New Guinea's fuel needs. But what we're expecting to happen is the government is going to go back to look at the contract that exists with Pima Energy and effectively try and introduce more competitions to market. We've heard from the Energy and Petroleum Ministry that they believed a lot of these coming off the fact they're effectively in mono contract with the aviation industry, and because Pima is such a large supplier. So on top of the government's looking at this contract and trying to introduce competitions, government does hope these roundtable talks will solve some of these issues between central bank and pure managing. Quite a big work out. Good talk. Thanks, Tim. Thanks, Beth. One more. It's quite a long-running and bit of a complicated issue, but effectively, Puma Energy is the largest supplier of fueling in Papua New Guinea and indeed the only supplier of aviation fuel to country. So if the any trouble issue pop with Puma Energy, it's likely have some very serious ramifications for fuel supply in the country. At the heart of this issue is basically disagreements between the country's central bank, Bank of Papua New Guinea or BPNG, and the Puma Energy, and the amount of foreign exchange is the amount of foreign currency that the company needs to import crude oil. Now that has been escalating for quite some time, and we do know that some allegations that the central bank has raised will be raised the governments as part of the 30-day national emergency, and they'll examine those allegations that the central bank is raising against the Pima Energy. Now for Pima Energy in its part, it says that the foreign exchange or the currency needs that require aren't being met, so then it's being unable to import the level of crude oil that needs to be refined to supply the country's energy need. Now, on top of that, also what we've seen is Bank South Pacific, Papua New Guinea largest bank. They've independently written to Pure Energy intending to close its account. Now, in a statement, Bank South Pacific says that it's doing so under its obligation to strictly comply with all regulatory requirements. So, Pure not being able to bank in Papua New Guinea would, of course, be quite disastrous for the country, something that would lead to, of course, it's not being able to operate its business and likely lead to very serious fuel shortages both at the Bausa and as well for aviation fuel supply. And of course, the issue of foreign currency in Papua New Guinea, particularly for businesses, has always been a problem. Yeah, it really has for effectively a decade now, and ultimately it comes down to, again, I guess, the economic mismatch between when the foreign currency supply and when the foreign currency demand. But as it is understood, this should effectively came out from the central bank having a look at its major foreign currency supplies. Now, Pumeji Energy March last year wrote the central bank saying that didn't have enough foreign currency to be supplying the market as it says it is needed. The central bank then enters into special purpose audit of Puma Energy to get an understanding as to the level of foreign currency that is needed, and that's now effectively lead to these very major disagreements between the central bank and Puma Energy. Then likely these allegations that the central bank will be raising with the governments about the company. Yeah. What sort of flow-on effects we're likely to see for people of Papua New Guinea? For the effects we have seen saying, main one that of course concerns many in Papua New Guinea has been grounding of flight. So in December last year, when the central bank and the Puma Energy were engaged in this disagreement, Puma Energy say that it didn't have the kind of foreign currency they didn't need it to continue its supply. And we quickly saw that flights were grounded. We saw that New Guinea and Pangaea canceled many of their flights in December. We've seen the same thing happen again just last week. So on an announcement from Puma Energy that if it wasn't receiving the foreign currency they needed, then wasn't receiving it, and they would be need the rationing fuel supply, we again saw flights across the country be cancelled very quickly. So that's likely to have a serious impact to aviation industry if this can't be worked out or resolved anytime soon. And of course then they also consider that at the border the people will be hit the kind of fuel supply that should exist doesn't exist. And of course many people in Papua New Guinea are very familiar with kind of power outages that impact the country. So diesel generators are very common for people run for their household supply. So if the fuel isn't therefore it's going to widespread impacts on household. How do you think this will going to be resolved, Tim? It's a good question, and ultimately that's what the government is rapidly trying to do now. It's called the 30 days of emergency. It basically says, right, we're going to have round table to talk, to bring everyone to the table to see if we can work out a resolution through the now Bank South Pacific has already agreed to extend out when it will be closing the accounts of Puma Energy till March next year. So at least they provide some relief that the company is going to be able to continue banking in the country. So there's certainly not an immense deadline if company not being able to bank and for it not to be able to fill its supply, of course, Papua New Guinea's fuel needs. But what we're expecting to happen is the government is going to go back to look at the contract that exists with Puma Energy and effectively trying and introduce more competitions to the market. We've heard from the Energy and Petroleum Ministry that they believe there are a lot of these coming out the facts there is effectively a monthly contract with the aviation industry, and because Puma is such a large supplier. So on top of the government's looking at the contract and trying to introduce competition, the government doesn't have these roundtable talks will solve some of this issue between central bank and pure managing. Quite a bit to work out. Good to talk to team. Thanks, Beth.